I want to start a small family farm. Let's say I have around 20 acres. What are the considerations I should be thinking about if I want to do cattle?
The biggest thing with cattle is like the upfront investment, not only just for the cows, but the infrastructure. Like it's not really super inexpensive to get going. This pasture was established, with the seed and the drill rental and the fuel and the whole bit. I mean, this is about $150 an acre just to get the grass established. We've got a lot of fence up here. There's $8,000, $9,000 worth of fence back here. We've also got buried water, which isn't something you have to have, but it's a very nice to have, particularly if you're going to have cattle during the winter. If you're in a winter region where it can freeze, there's a lot of upfront costs that come with making cattle super efficient. I rotated these cows standing back behind us yesterday. There's 40,000 pounds of live weight. It took me 15 minutes to manage them for 24 hours. I mean, that was tearing down a line, setting up a line, moving a water. 15 minutes done. Come back and check on them, make sure everybody's there. That's all that's required. But to make it that fast, you've got to have all this infrastructure that we just discussed, and that's a high upfront cost. And I think that's something that's difficult to wrap your mind around if you've never been an entrepreneur before, particularly with something like a 100% grass-fed cow. You're looking at a 24 to 30 month return on investment from the time it's born to the time it's finished.
What's the least amount of acres you'd start a cattle enterprise on?
I think if you've got some other enterprises going on that you can stack in there, like with 10 to 15 acres, like you can do a few head of cattle. It's not going to be a full-time occupation, certainly. I really feel like 20 acres, you're getting to a size where you can do some serious beef, honestly. Once you get in that 20 to 50 acre range, now we're talking about like that could long term, once all of your expenses are out of the way, your upfront costs, you've got a cow-calf operation built, like that can almost be a full-time occupation for one person if you're talking about 50 acres. So those are kind of three different scenarios that people can think about, depending on how much land they have access to.
Starting with stockers versus cow-calf.
Stockers. Start with stockers. Do not go cow-calf first. Cow-calf's expensive. The stockers you can flip a lot faster. You can buy a 12-month-old cow, and then 12 to 18 months, you've got money coming back in. You're not feeding the mama cow through the winter. Mamas and babies take a lot more management experience, at least in my opinion, than stockers. If you're getting healthy stockers from somebody, you just put them on some grass and go. One size fits all in terms of infrastructure. You can have very basic high tensile fence in place to manage them. One single hot wire is going to manage them. You got little baby calves, you got to put up 3 of these, front and back, and they're still going to get through them. And then you got to chase them and find them, and it's time consuming. And I think the big black hole that people can get sucked into with cow-calf is you do all this reading, right, and you're trying to find the perfect breed, right? And you do all this reading on all these websites, and a breed association's job is to promote their breed and make them sound like they are, the best that has ever walked the face of the planet. Like they're the best mothers, they're the easiest calving, they produce the best milk, it's the best tasting beef, and then if you go cow-calf, you invest all your money in cows and calves, and you find out, I don't like this breed. Well, you've sunk all your seed money into a cow-calf operation, whereas with stockers, you can buy some Angus, you can buy some Herefords, you can get some Red Devons or South Poles or, whatever it is you want to try, and you can, see, well, how are these guys in a rotational grazing system? Or, how do they finish? What do they look like? What's their personalities like? Are they docile? Are they jumpy? Or, whatever. It's, you kind of try before you buy in terms of, marrying into one breed.
But when you try, if you're running them on grass, buy out of a grass-based system.
If at all possible, at great lengths. If you have to drive 3 or 4 hours to get stockers, if you can get them out of a grass-only system, that's paramount to whatever breed you're talking about.
Can you run through some quick math buying a stocker to what the return on that investment is going to be?
Sure, and there are two ways to look at that. Are we selling it in bulk? Are we selling it retail by the cut? Today, if I go buy, let's say, a 500-pound animal, even if I'm paying on the high end, let's just make it easy. You can probably find cows cheaper than this, most definitely. $2 a pound. That animal cost me $1,000. To manage it for, I'll even say 18 months, one winter, that's key because we have to feed it hay in the winter. I'm going to have another 350, maybe $400 in it with some hay, land rent, mineral, just some very basic costs that you would expect to have. And let's say when we get it to market, it's 1,000 pounds. We sell our bulk cows. So if somebody's buying a half or a whole, for $3.25 a pound live weight, which is a lot higher than that $2 you paid for it. But you're doing a lot of hand holding there. You're managing that animal for 18 months. That's a long time. There's a lot of labor there. There's a lot of risk. It's not like a chicken that you have for 8 weeks, and if it dies, you're out $5 to $10. If something goes wrong with this cow, you could be out $1,000 plus 18 months. That's a lot. So bigger risk, my book, needs to be bigger reward. So we'll take, that investment where we've got $1,000-ish, and we might sell it. It might be a $3,000 cow by the time we get it to the butcher, but we've got to haul it down there. We got to find the customer. We got to collect the deposit. We've got to walk them through the cut selection process. We've got to own or be able to rent a livestock trailer, a truck. We've got to have a butcher that we have a relationship with. There's a lot that goes into that, and then walking that customer through this cut selection process of, what do I get turned into hamburger versus roasts and steaks? And there's a lot of education that goes into that. I've got a whole web page on our farm website that talks about beef cuts, and I still, after people read that, I might have to spend an hour on the phone with them at least the first time. There's a lot of hand-holding and management. We have a very high level of customer service. I'm making sure I'm getting paid for that customer service time. But we can make $2,000 roughly on a cow after 18 months of work. So when you start to break that down, per month, you're really only making about $100 per month per cow, and you've got a lot of risk there. And if you want to retail it, you can definitely make more money, but you've got to be able to retail at some pretty high prices at a pretty good farmer's market in an urban area to make that happen. We can make an extra $600-700 on a cow if we retail it, if we sell every steak at a very high retail value, which we can, particularly in the summer. But I don't go overboard trying to retail too many cows. We've got a lot of demand for bulk, even at that high price, and the customers paying for the butchering, they're still getting 100% grass-fed beef on chemical-free pasture in their freezer for about $9 a pound, and that's everything from a T-bone steak to ground beef. That's a pretty good value, and that's how I approach that. I don't ask them, do you want to spend $1,800 on a half cow with butchering or $3,500 on a whole cow? It's, do you want to spend $9 a pound on phenomenal tasting, highly nutritious, 100% grass-fed black Angus beef? They see that as a good value.
One thing that always comes up is, how do I learn how to start rotationally grazing? How often do you move your cows? How do you know when to move them?
Yeah.
How do you get people started there?
Definitely you want to, do some reading, watch some videos, guys like, Greg Judy, Joel Salatin, Gabe Brown, Cody Holmes. A lot of these guys have a lot of good stuff to watch, but you can kind of see behind me here that this grass has been pretty knocked down. And then, what I'm looking at over here is pretty lush and quite a bit taller. We move our cows every 24 hours. So if you mess up, you've only messed up one paddock. You go out, you look at, the next day, you come out and you look and you're like, well, it looks like they overgrazed. So I better give them a little bit more space today if the grass looks the same where they're headed to. Or, they left a lot in here. They really didn't eat it. So I'm gonna pinch it down a little bit. I'm gonna give them a little bit less space today. And that's the assessment you do every day. And after 3 to 4 years of rotational grazing, you really start to develop a pretty good eye for, what's your live weight, what's your pasture doing. You start to learn and look and like, well, I think the carrying capacity per acre is about this, and it starts to go up as we rotationally graze. This in 2012 was a burned out genetically modified soybean field and had 1% organic matter. And we could only run about 10,000 pounds an acre, and that was really pushing it. We're doing over 20,000 pounds an acre now. We've literally doubled the carrying capacity of this pasture by rotationally grazing. But, that's how you start, is just looking at they ate too little, they ate too much, they're famished, they're about ready to knock me over to get to the next paddock. I need to give them a little bit more. And then you just keep, observing, assessing, and modifying what you're doing day to day.
How would you describe overgrazing or ate too much?
Overgrazing, where they've like nibbled the plants down below, like this. And there are some areas in here where they've done that. We've got some tall, stringy stuff in here I'm trying to get them to knock down. So I'm willing to let them overgraze a smidge in here to get this tall stuff knocked down. But you don't want to see super short turf. Like when they leave, you want to see some tillers still left on that plant. That's really overgrazing. And overgrazing, there's a fine line. I mean, there's studies that show like if you graze 50% of a plant, you've done no harm. If you graze, 60% of a plant, you've done 10% harm. If you graze 70% of a plant, you've done 60% harm. Like it drops quickly. So that's kind of my tip for overgrazing. Like you want those plants to still kind of cover your foot, up to about your shin, your ankle, as you're walking around after the cows have left.
There's a lot of rules of thumb out there when it comes to grazing, what you leave, what they eat. How do you define that for you?
Well, a lot of that people will tell you that it really depends on what you're trying to do in a given area. And if you're trying to really knock stuff down, you can pinch them down a lot more. So if you give them a rectangle, they'll tend to knock down more. If you give them more of a square, they'll graze more. But my general rule of thumb, assuming I don't have some ulterior motive, right? I'm just day to day. I'm trying to graze, keep up the grass, fatten the animals. Not really after anything management-wise on the ground, other than building soil, which I'm always after. I really like Greg Judy's rule, and his general rule is graze 60%, trample 30%, and leave 10% left standing. So when we've got some seed heads back here behind us that are left, like that's fine. We want this because eventually these seeds are going to fall to the ground, and that becomes our future seed bank, particularly if these are varieties that we want to have out here. So I think that's a really good general rule of thumb, particularly to start with, and then like once you get some experience under your belt, you can branch out from there.
I have brand new land that's never been grazed before. Do I just start grazing it and see how the cattle do?
Yeah, I think, like if you've got some land that's got some grass on it and you don't even really know what you're doing, like I don't like to give rules of thumb in terms of cows per acre, but if you're in an area that gets modest to good rainfall, like go 2 acres per cow, or maybe even 2.5 acres. That's really, really conservative. Throw some cows out there and see what happens. You can kind of see like what forages start to come back, learn to identify forages, and then you can start to make determinations like, hey, I've got some really good forages out here. I don't really feel like I need to do much, or I'm not seeing a whole lot of clover, so I'll look into maybe like, frost seeding some clover or drilling in some clover so I can add that variety into my pasture. But that's a great way to start. Throw some cows out there, get some reels and posts, and just move them every 24 hours. That's the big thing, is to move them around, let this rest for 30, 40, 50 days, whatever it takes till it comes back, and then you move the cows through there again.